I'm advised that the governor's in the building, will be here shortly, very momentarily. I'd like to take a moment to thank Mayville Engineering Company for their sponsorship of Governor Walker's remarks today. Again, we really appreciate the sponsorships throughout this conference, and Mayville Engineering is among them. Thank you, Mayville. You know, Governor Walker doesn't need much of an introduction. I've had the privilege of knowing him for a number of years and working with him, and he was a county executive, as was I. The first observation one has to make with Governor Scott Walker is that he's that rare kind of political leader who says what he's going to do, means it, and then actually does it. You know, and Governor Walker and the new legislature have hit the ground running with a special session on jobs. He's signed tax cuts, sweeping regulatory reform, and substantive lawsuit reform. Many of the top reforms business leaders we have actually been seeking for years. Governor Walker and the legislature have delivered. Now he's taking on comprehensive spending reform, collective bargaining reform, and balancing the budget without a tax increase. I remember noting an article in Forbes magazine of October of Albert Shanker, the head of the American Federation of Teachers, wherein he was quoted as saying, when school children start paying union dues, that's when I'll start representing school children. And that's just my aside. Governor Walker has taken an approach to balance the budget. I suppose it's high profile. We all know all about it, but we want to hear directly from the man. And it's my privilege to introduce Governor Scott Walker. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. It is an honor to be speaking today in front of the job creators in the private sector who are going to help us achieve our goal of creating 250,000 new jobs by 2015 in the private sector. You know, it hardly seems that it was just a few months ago, but on the night of November 2nd, I spoke at a podium like this, and instead of having my campaign sign out or a brown bag sign, we had a banner up that said something like this. It said, "Wisconsin is open for business." And the reason I put that sign up was because it wasn't about me from that point forward. It wasn't about an election. It wasn't about a name. It wasn't about a candidate. It was about the people of the state speaking and saying that we need to get Wisconsin working again. And the way to do that is really twofold. I'm going to talk about briefly here this morning. First, it was about changing the business climate so the job creators in the private sector in the state could feel welcome about reinvesting in jobs and capital and putting people back to work in this state. And secondly, it was about making our state work again when it comes to a budget that is stable, not only now, but making a commitment to the future so that our children and our grandchildren don't face the kind of budget battles we face today. Now, I want to thank so many of you here because many people didn't think it was possible, but we didn't waste any time. On November 3rd, I came over here to the Capitol and started working on our budget and our legislative agenda. We were aggressive all throughout the transition. We had a lot of help from so many of you in this room, James and Jim and so many other organizations that stepped up and said, we're willing to come to the table to help put the people of the state back to work. On January 3rd, when I took the oath of office, I said in that speech that I was ready to start right away. In fact, it was interesting. A couple of weeks ago, long before this budget battle began, the Associated Press came in and did a story that ran nationwide, and they said, why are you running so quickly? Why are you acting as quick as you are? You know, most states, the governors haven't even found the bathroom. The legislature's barely moved in their offices.
yet you're already moving through your legislative agenda. What's going on here? I said, it's real simple. You see, for about 2 years, I was part of a job interview. And I applied to the people of the state telling them that this state was headed in the wrong direction. And just like any of you who applies to be the CEO of a company that's headed in the wrong direction, you tell people what you're going to do to turn it around. And I told the people of the state what I was going to do to turn the state around. And when you've got an economic and a fiscal crisis, you don't wait a year, you don't wait 6 months, you don't even wait a month, you start on day one, and that's exactly what we've done. We have shown that Wisconsin is open for business. That's why minutes after taking the oath of office and giving my address, I literally went back to the governor's conference room and gave the call, the official call for a special session to Representative Jeff Fitzgerald, the Speaker of the Assembly, and State Senator Scott Fitzgerald, the new Majority Leader, and told them that I expected the legislative body to come back into special session immediately. And the next morning, we gave them a stack of bills, and as much as many of us wondered what was going to happen, they lived up to that challenge. In fact, they exceeded that challenge. I challenged them in that inaugural address to act swiftly and decisively. My hope was that in the first 30 to 45 days, they'd pass our legislative agenda. They moved even quicker. They passed tax relief when it comes to targeting those who want to create jobs in the state. We passed an incentive for other corporations to come in from outside of the state and create new jobs in the state. We passed an incentive or a regulatory requirement that says you cannot pass future tax increases without a supermajority in the state legislature to ensure not just today, but in years to come, our taxpayers are priority number one. In addition to releasing our tax burden, you all know in the private sector, it's not just about taxes. It's about the cost of regulation and litigation. And so we've moved aggressively in regulatory reform that says we're all about public safety and public health, but we think the regulations that we have in state government should be science-based and predictable. No more, no less. If it's about protecting the public's health and protecting the public's safety, we should do it. But we shouldn't be involved in things that go far beyond that. And so we're reining in the out-of-control regulatory climate here in the state. We passed in the first days in office, and I signed into law, one of the most aggressive tort reform, lawsuit abuse reform pieces of legislation in the country, and I appreciate all the support of people in this room for pushing that forward. And we not only helped our employers, we helped our workers as well. You know, you see, we were one of the few states in this country that still taxed health savings accounts. Now, as that's been repealed, it allows our workers, our family farmers, our self-employed individuals to have one more point to having affordable health care options without having the state tax those opportunities. And in probably one of the most aggressive moves, we opted to move forward on a plan to take what is now the Department of Commerce and take all the components in that Department of Commerce that are about promoting commerce and instead transfer that over into a new public-private partnership that will begin July 1st, a new Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, to say the sole focus of that corporation is not going to be about regulating commerce, it's going to be about promoting it, it's going to be swift, it's going to be certain, it's going to work with the private sector to help us achieve our goal of creating 250,000 private sector jobs over the next 4 years. Now, that's what we did in the first month. And we're not stopping. You know, that is just the first phase, because it is my fundamental belief, if we're going to show that Wisconsin's open for business is more than just a slogan or a bumper sticker, we have to show it not only in symbolism but in substance. And I believe the message has been heard loud and clear all across the state and increasingly across the country. Now, the next step for us is not only continuing down the path with individual pieces of legislation that make it easier for you, the job creators of the state, to put more people to work. The next great quest for us begins next Tuesday when I introduce the next biennial budget, because you see, you can't have certainty in the economy if you don't have certainty in the state's finances. It's why about 2 weeks ago I introduced the bill that I did to repair the budget mess we inherited from Jim Doyle for this year, and the even bigger mess we inherited, the $3.6 billion deficit we have to balance for the next biennial budget. And let me be clear right off the bat, and I said it last night if you tuned in, this is not a battle against our workers. I have great respect for the men and women of this state who've dedicated their lives to a profession of public service. The men and women who each day, more than 300,000, show up to work in our state and our local governments all across the state of Wisconsin. They're good, decent professionals who overwhelmingly are doing the right things for the right reasons. This is not a battle with them. This is a battle with the big union, public employee union leaders who are trying to come in and dominate this debate from out of this state, because for them it's not about their workers' money, it's about their money, and it's time we stand with the workers and the hardworking taxpayers of this state, not the out-of-state special interests. You know, the tens of thousands of protesters, at least those from Wisconsin, who've been in our capital over the past 2 weeks, have every right to be heard. But as the days continue and we see more and more protesters coming in from Chicago and Nevada and New Jersey, and in particular Washington, D.C., I am not going to allow for 1 minute their voices to be able to drown out the voices of the millions of taxpayers in this state who want sanity and security. You see, this battle is much bigger than the next biennial budget. This battle is about our commitment to the future. Now, many of you know I have 2 sons in high school. And I remember back when I was in high school, there was a great leader in this state taking us out of recession back then by the name of Tommy Thompson. And he helped us turn the state around. He helped us in his first term. His policies helped the people of the state, not the government. The people of this state create 258,000 new jobs by the end of his term. But he was bold. He was aggressive. He took on the status quo. And there's no doubt what we're doing in the Capitol these days is bold. Anytime you challenge the status quo, you've got to be bold. But what we're asking for as well is modest. It's modest when it comes to what everybody else outside of government is asking for when it comes to employee contributions. You all know this firsthand. I mean, think about it. Most of our state workers pay next to nothing for their retirement. We're asking for 5.8%. Right now, most of our workers across the state are paying about 6% for their health care insurance premium. We're asking for 12.6%. Both of those are well below what people all across the state are paying every single day. Every single day. In fact, I was out about a week and a half ago. I toured around manufacturing plants all across the state of Wisconsin, and I talked to workers, the good, hardworking, middle-class, blue-collar workers that make this state. The kind of people the state was built on, the kind of people that will continue to take us out of this economic recession. As I visited these plants and talked to these workers, I found that so many of them, like so many of you know, are paying 25 to 50% of their health insurance premiums. Most of them don't even have pensions, and the retirement plans they do have are 401k plans. A number of the stops along the way, I found out that in the last year or two, some of their employers have suspended the employee match just to ensure they could keep the people they had working again. That's what's happening outside of government. So what we're asking for is very reasonable. We're asking for a little bit more. It affects me, my family, the legislature, my cabinet, as well as all of our state and local government workers, to pay a little bit more for health care and a little bit more for pensions. But in return, we give them the true freedom of choice for those workers to decide whether or not they want those dues automatically deducted from their payroll. And in many cases, up to $1,000 a year that instead they could keep in their pocket and use to offset the impact of the cost for health care and pension premiums. That's what this is really about. Don't let yourself be fooled for 1 minute to think that those folks, those public union bosses coming in from other states are concerned about their workers' money. If they were, a week ago, they claimed we couldn't have the 5 and the 12. And the reason they said that was it would be devastating. Their members couldn't handle it. There was no way financially the public workers they represented could handle that. A week later, they were willing to give that up. The reason is it is about money. But it's not about the workers' money. It's about the money that goes into the pockets of those public employee union leaders. Instead, we should stand with the workers and the hard-working taxpayers of the state and say, we've got a better solution here in Wisconsin. Now, as I mentioned, that some along the way might say, well, does it really require reforming collective bargaining to go down this path? And the answer is simply yes. And I know it firsthand. You see, for about 8 years before I was elected as your governor, I was a county official. And I saw time and time again at the local level, when we wanted to adjust our budget to take care of the crisis we inherited, we'd ask for modest contributions when it came to pension and health care. One year we even asked for a limited number of 35-hour work weeks. Instead, the union leaders told us time and time again, because they were empowered by the collective bargaining agreements in this state, they said, forget it. Go ahead. Lay off 400 or 500 employees. We don't care. They'd much rather prefer that than giving in even an inch on those benefits. That's what's at stake here. Another good example. For many of you who are involved in your communities and your schools, you can see it firsthand. So many of our school districts across the state have the impact that because of collective bargaining agreements, they're required to buy their health insurance from the WA Trust. The WA Trust, that's the State Teachers Union Health Company. If they didn't have to, because our bill passes, once our bill passes, they'll be freed of that mandate. And instead, they can opt into buying into the state employee health care plan or some lower cost option, which then would empower them to save at least $68 million per year. That's money that can go in the classroom to pay for more teachers and curriculum and to actually help our children. That's what this is all about. Others on the national level have said, well, you know, why not, if this is shared sacrifice, why not ask others to pay? Why not ask corporations and higher income individuals to pay a little bit more? Well, as you all know, we've done that. We've done that in the past 2 years. In fact, ironically, 2 years ago, Governor Jim Doyle and all but 2 of the Senate Democrats who are hiding out in another state right now voted for a budget repair bill. Mind you, a budget repair bill that was introduced on a Wednesday and voted through on a Thursday. How about that for having the public involved in it? Apparently, when you raise taxes by $1 billion, it's okay to ram it through, but when you give people a week and a half and unprecedented amount of public hearings, that's not time enough. But they've done that before, and we've seen the impact. It has a devastating impact on the economy. Anybody who doubts that needs not just look at 2 years ago, but look at our neighbors to the south in Illinois. A month ago, Illinois opted to solve their budgetary crisis, at least temporarily, by raising taxes on corporations and individuals. They did that to avoid the tough choices. You see, in Illinois, they can't pay the bills, and they have a pension system that's barely half funded. So what do? They turned to raising taxes. What has happened in the months since? Businesses and individuals have escaped to Wisconsin and Indiana and other places all across the country, and more headed down the path. Because the answer is not raising taxes to balance the budget. You see, that's a fundamental Wisconsin trait. It's not just something I campaigned on that comes out of my party platform. If you look back nearly 163 years ago, it comes out of the state's Constitution. There's a frugality clause that has never been amended, never been adjusted in the Constitution that was approved in the spring of 1848. It talks about how frugality and moderation in government ultimately leads to freedom and prosperity for our people. That's what this battle's all about. It's not about balancing the next budget. It's about making a commitment to the future. A commitment so that my children and your children and children all across this state aren't saddled with the burden of the excessive debt and out-of-control spending that this past generation has passed on to today's generation. We're going to stop that. I think all of us recognize that we can't go any further. We're broke. We've been broke for years. We've been broke time and time again, and it's about time we had leaders who had the courage to stand up and tell the public the truth, that we can't go down this path anymore because it's not fair to the next generation. We're going to balance this budget not just for today, but for tomorrow, because if we don't, our children and their children face even more dire consequences in the years to come. That's what this battle's about. the last thing I'd ask of all of you here today, and we need it now more than ever, as I look across this crowd and I see a lot of nodding heads, people who appreciate what we're saying, what we're trying to do. You might say, well, okay, that's great, but this is a sympathetic crowd. In fact, sometimes the joke goes, you're preaching to the choir. Well, as many of you know, my father's a retired minister, and years ago a minister was asked, why do you preach to the choir? He said, it's real simple. I want the choir to sing. So today, if you don't remember anything else, and hopefully you'll remember most of everything we did say, and others are saying it as well, but if you don't remember anything else, what I'm asking for you to do is to go back to your businesses, to go back to your communities, go back to the chamber and the Rotary Club and the tech group and all the other things you're a part of. Go back to your communities and sing. Tell people why this battle is so important. Tell people why it's not just about balancing the budget today, but making a commitment to the future to ensure that our children don't face the same dire consequences we're going through here and all across the country. When we do, I have no doubt that the voices from Wisconsin will undoubtedly trump the voices coming in from all across this country. Thank you very much for your support. God bless you, and God bless the great state of Wisconsin.